AITA for confronting my neighbor about their pet snake? Hey Reddit, I, 28F, have been dealing with a pretty uncomfortable situation with my neighbor, 30M, and his pet snake. Here's the deal. I live in a small apartment complex where everyone pretty much knows each other. A few months ago, my neighbor moved in next door with his beloved pet snake, which he often takes out for walks around the complex. Now, I'm not particularly afraid of snakes, but I find them a bit unsettling, especially when they're slithering around on the communal grassy areas. At first, I try to be understanding. I get it. People have pets they love and want to show off. But then things started to get a bit out of hand. One day, I was coming home from work and saw the snake outside my door, just chilling on the welcome mat. I freaked out a bit because, unexpected snake encounter. I cautiously approached my neighbor and asked if he could keep his snake away from my doorstep. He seemed a bit taken aback, but said he'd try to be more mindful. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. The snake started showing up in other places too. Near the communal mailbox, in the laundry room, yes, really, and even once it was sunbathing on my car hood. Each time, I politely reminded my neighbor that not everyone is comfortable with his snake roaming around. Last week was the last straw for me. I was hosting a small barbecue in the courtyard for some friends from work. We were all having a good time when suddenly, there it was, Mr. Snake, slithering through our picnic area like it owned the place. My friends, who are not snake enthusiasts either, were visibly uncomfortable. I couldn't take it anymore. I went over to my neighbor, who was sitting on a bench nearby, and asked him firmly but politely if he could please keep his snake in his apartment, or at least on a leash when outside. He got defensive and said his snake needed exercise and fresh air, just like any other pet. I argued that the communal areas were for everyone to enjoy, and not everyone was comfortable with snakes. Things got a bit heated, and a few other neighbors started to gather, curious about the commotion. Some were on my side, agreeing that it was a bit much to have a snake wandering freely. Others thought I was overreacting and that I should just get used to it. In the end, my neighbor reluctantly agreed to limit the snake's outdoor adventures and apologized if he had made anyone uncomfortable. We both agreed to try and be more considerate of each other's space. Fast forward to a few days ago, I was heading out to do some grocery shopping when I noticed my neighbor sitting on the bench outside with his snake draped around his shoulders. I paused for a moment, unsure if I should say anything, but decided to approach him calmly. I asked him if he remembered our agreement about keeping the snake indoors or on a leash outside. He looked sheepish and admitted that he had taken the snake out for a short walk to get some fresh air. I reminded him that we had agreed to respect each other's boundaries, and having the snake out like this still made me uncomfortable. He seemed genuinely apologetic this time and promised it wouldn't happen again. We talked for a bit longer, and he explained that he didn't realize how unsettling it could be for others. He assured me he would be more mindful in the future. Reflecting on the situation later, I wondered if I had been too harsh in confronting him again. After all, he seemed genuinely remorseful. But at the same time, I felt it was important to assert my comfort in my own living space. So, Reddit, AITA for confronting my neighbor about his pet snake a second time? I just want to feel at ease in my own home without unexpected reptilian visitors. AITA for asking my roommate to stop singing in the shower? Hey Reddit, I, 25F, have been dealing with a bit of a dilemma with my roommate, 27F, lately. Here's the scoop. I've been living with my roommate for about a year now, and for the most part, things have been great. We get along well and share similar interests. However, there's one thing that's been driving me a bit crazy: her singing in the shower. Now, don't get me wrong, she has a lovely voice, but she tends to belt out show tunes and pop songs at the top of her lungs every morning. It wouldn't be so bad if it didn't wake me up almost every day. I work late shifts and really value my sleep in the mornings. I've tried dropping hints about it, like mentioning how loud the walls are or how thin the bathroom door seems to be, but she hasn't picked up on them. Last week, after another morning of being jolted awake by a rendition of Defying Gravity, I decided to gently confront her about it. I waited until we were both in the kitchen making breakfast and brought it up casually. I told her that while I admire her enthusiasm for singing, the noise level in the morning is disrupting my sleep. I suggested she could maybe tone it down a bit or save the vocal warm-ups for later in the day when I'm not trying to catch some Z's. She seemed a bit embarrassed at first but apologized and said she didn't realize it was bothering me so much. She promised to be more mindful and even offered to use headphones while she showers to minimize the noise. I felt relieved that she took it well, but part of me wondered if I was being too sensitive about the whole thing. After all, singing in the shower is a pretty harmless habit. So, Reddit, AITA for asking my roommate to stop singing so loudly in the shower? AITA for bringing my homemade garlic sauce to a potluck? Hey Reddit, I, 30M, recently found myself in a bit of a sticky situation at a potluck dinner, and I'm wondering if I might have been in the wrong. I take a lot of pride in my cooking, especially when it comes to sauces. I have this killer garlic sauce recipe that my friends and family rave about. So, when I was invited to a potluck dinner hosted by a friend, I decided to whip up a batch to bring along. I arrived at the potluck with my homemade garlic sauce and proudly set it on the table with the other dishes. However, I quickly noticed some raised eyebrows and exchanged glances among the other guests. I overheard a few whispers about how it was a bit strange to bring a homemade sauce to a potluck instead of a main dish or dessert. I started to feel a bit self-conscious about my choice, but I shrugged it off and joined the festivities. When it came time to eat, I noticed that my garlic sauce was largely untouched while the store-bought dips and dishes were getting devoured. I couldn't help but feel a bit hurt. Later in the evening, one of the guests approached me and gently asked why I had brought sauce instead of something more traditional for a potluck. I explained that I wanted to share something special that I had made myself and thought it would complement the other dishes. They nodded politely, but I sensed some lingering awkwardness. As I left the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I had missed the mark. So, Reddit, AITA for bringing my homemade garlic sauce to a potluck instead of a more conventional dish? AITA for asking my coworker to stop bringing strong-smelling food to the office? Hey Reddit, I, 32F, need some perspective on a situation with one of my coworkers, late 20s. Here's what happened. I work in a small office with an open layout, which means we all share the same space. About a month ago, my coworker started bringing in homemade lunches that are, let's just say, very aromatic. He's really into spicy and heavily seasoned foods, which I'm sure taste great, but the smell tends to linger and fill the entire office. At first, I tried to ignore it and chalked it up to different tastes. But as time went on, the pungent odors started to bother me more and more. It got to the point where I would dread lunchtime because I knew the whole office would smell like his latest culinary creation. I finally mustered up the courage to politely talk to him about it. I waited until a quiet moment at our desks and brought it up gently, saying that while I appreciate his love for flavorful food, the strong smells are sometimes overwhelming in our shared workspace. He seemed a bit surprised but apologized and said he hadn't realized it was bothering anyone. He assured me he would try to be more mindful and even offered to eat in a different area of the office or bring in less fragrant dishes. I felt relieved that he took it well, but later I started wondering if I was being unreasonable. After all, people should be able to enjoy their lunch without feeling like they're bothering others. So, Reddit, AITA for asking my coworker to stop bringing strong-smelling food to the office? AITA for confronting my friend about always being late? Hey Reddit, I, 26M, could use some advice on a situation with one of my closest friends, 27F. Here's the deal. For as long as I can remember, my friend has had a habit of being fashionably late to almost every hangout, party, or dinner we plan together. It's gotten to the point where it's almost expected that she'll arrive at least 30 minutes after the agreed-upon time, if not more. At first, I brushed it off as just a quirk of hers, but lately, it's been really frustrating me. It feels like my time isn't being respected when I'm always the one waiting around for her to show up. There have been instances where I've had to make excuses to other friends, or even rearrange plans because she's running late. Last week, we had plans to meet up for dinner at a new restaurant in town. I arrived early as usual and waited, and waited. She finally strolled in almost 45 minutes late, with a casual apology and a laugh about how busy her day had been. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I gently but firmly told her that her chronic lateness was starting to bother me. I explained how it made me feel like my time wasn't valued and how it often inconvenienced others who were waiting for us. She seemed a bit taken aback, but apologized sincerely. She admitted that she struggled with time management and promised to make a better effort to be punctual in the future. I felt a bit guilty afterward, wondering if I had been too harsh in confronting her about something that might just be a part of her personality. But at the same time, I hoped my honesty would lead to positive change in our friendship. So, Reddit, AITA for confronting my friend about always being late?